Look, I opened this jar of rotten baby food, and well, a butterfly came out.
King David danced before the altar naked when they brought it into the temple, so I interrupted and said, "Okay, let's make it clear. There's dancing, but no naked dancing in the church."
Welcome to the Comedians in Elevators podcast. I've got my guest, Tim White. Tim, say hi, introduce yourself, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am Tim White, and I am a computer klutz. I've had caused a problem just getting online. I'm a pastor, retired after 51 years, and that's who I am.
Well, so instead of a klutz, I guess we could just throw the comedy as your, computer super genius, and then we can just work our way backwards from there and plug in along the way, right?
Right.
All right. So, Tim, are you ready to get started?
I'm ready to get started.
Listen, to my regular listeners, I know you don't like when at the beginning of these conversations I ask you to subscribe. None of us like it. I don't like saying it. I don't like it being in here. But it's frustrating. You know what else is frustrating? It's also frustrating when I look in the back end of the YouTube channel and I see that 56% of you that watch frequently haven't yet subscribed. And I know this because I see it in the comments section. You say things like, "I didn't know I didn't subscribe." And that's actually what fuels the show. Basically, it's like you're making a donation to the show. So that's why I ask all the time, because it enables us to build and build and build. And we're going for the long term here. Hit the subscribe button and we'll continue to build this show for you. That's my promise. Thank you to all you guys that do subscribe. It means the world to me. All right. So the whole point of the podcast is to compare and contrast the comic versus the comedian. So I define the comic as any person telling funny jokes versus the comedian who's a funny person telling any jokes. So, Tim, would you agree that you start as a comic and evolve into a comedian?
Well, yeah, I'm not a professional comedian, but being a pastor, there's plenty of things to laugh about, and so that's how I became a comedian.
Very nice. So you're not telling jokes, is that correct?
I do tell jokes everywhere I go.
Okay.
But I don't get paid yet. I'd like to become a professional comedian. I just like it for the business cards to be able to say when people ask you what you do.
That's the title of all titles, right? Is a comedian,
Yeah.
stand-up comedian in particular.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, let's start with the first question, which is about the role of persona in comedy. So how much of the comedian's voice is a character versus their real self?
I think everyone has a character within them that they project in different times in different ways, even if we're not conscious of that. And that character becomes part of our real self. It's just who we are. But what I found is that people are funny in every situation. Even people that are not funny are funny just because they're not funny. Maybe I fall into that category, but that's an important role. And it comes from a long line. My dad was a great jokester. He was a pastor. My grandpa was an incredible jokester and comedian, and he was a pastor too. And so there's plenty of things to laugh at myself at, and that's one of the great ways to get humor going.
Very cool. So so that would be, in my estimation, the blind spot, the thing you don't know why it's funny, but it's funny. And it's consistently so. So if you're from a lineage of pastors, there's something there. There's a blind spot there. So let's try and discover it, right? So
and what's really funny,
yeah, go ahead.
What's really funny is to laugh at other pastors, because a lot of pastors don't know they have that blind spot, and they don't know that they're funny, even when even though it's true.
So let's try and figure out, what is it? What's the consistency? What is that blind spot amongst pastors? Do you have an idea?
I think any profession where we're self-important, and we think we're self-important and we're just hiding behind that wall of being self-important, we have a huge blind spot. One time I went to a conference with neurologists. It was all neurologists, and we went to the NFL Super Bowl. And then one time we were going shopping and to a super golf store they have down in Orlando. And when I walked in with all these pastors, all these neurologists behind me, the girl at the teller said, "Don't tell me you're a group of neurologists." she could just spot us from everywhere. And I said, well, I'm not, but these guys are. And they all kind of nodded their head, nodded their head in a way that just showed they were neurologists. And so a lot of professions where we feel like we're important, we have a huge blind spot.
Interesting. That's interesting. So it's something like the emperor has no clothes, and that's what everyone
Yeah.
else is seeing potentially, right? But you don't see that
Yeah,
because you're.
I think so. And that's really funny.
It is. It's potentially funny, right? You gotta pull the robe and then see. Then you actually see the funny part is when you realize what the truth is. So does
Yeah.
authenticity matter, or is illusion part of the magic?
I think illusion might be part of the magic, and authenticity makes you the comedian or the comic, either way, to fall into those roles. But the fact that we have no clothes and we don't know it is really hilarious.
It is potentially for sure. So let's try with punching up versus punching down. So where do comics versus comedians stand on this? And let me put it in some historical context. Did a
Uh-huh.
jealous medieval prince become the first comedian by killing the court jester?
I think it was a jealous medieval priest or pastor that killed the court jester. But yeah, I think it's maybe been a long. What's amazing about laughter is that we need to laugh to survive. Human beings do, and even chimpanzees laugh. And I think dogs laugh. So it's part of a universal part of our creation, and it just constantly amazes me all the people that laughter. Because I've been a pastor for 51 years. When people are dying, they laugh, and people don't know that. And sometimes some of the best humor you'd ever see takes place in that last moment with their families when they chuckle about something. And babies laugh, even in the womb. So it's just something universal to all of us, and we desperately need it in our world.
Well, that's an interesting insight. I didn't know that dogs laugh. I haven't noticed it. I don't know. Is it very common?
Are you a dog person?
I mean, I don't actually have a dog,
Oh
but
yeah.
I guess that
If
might be
you
the
have a
difference.
dog, you can see them laugh all the time. I mean, when they fetch a
Huh.
ball or whatever, when they stick their tongue out, and they have a great sense of humor, and they'll tease you, and maybe they're the great. Instead of being our best friend, maybe they're our best critics. That they're always analyzing our humor and getting a good laugh out of it. We think we're dominating, but they're just there for the laughs.
Oh, that's one way to look at it. That's the
Yeah,
best audience member ever, right? Absolutely.
yeah.
So, would you say that the audience agreement with the comedian is a form of permission or alignment?
I believe so. That's absolutely true. Because you can be a hilarious person, the funniest person in the world, a Robin Williams type person, and people can just miss all the humor of it. So they have to buy in and have their humor. And so you look at the great comedians, and they have a way of getting that permission.
Okay, interesting. So they're not aligning perhaps as well, or instead?
Well, aligning with permission. I mean, there's still the differences because we laugh at our differences, and
Okay.
um, and so that's the funny thing. And that you think about comedians are always characters, they make it that way. Like, Jimmy Kimmel with his red hair stacked up
Beady,
really
beady, beady,
high
beady.
and straight, and he always makes fun of himself about that. And so the differences are what we laugh at and enjoy ourselves.
Okay. So, cultural translation of comedy. So, how do jokes that work in one country bomb in another?
Well, I have a good illustration of this. Our church is a very diverse church. We have 11 different congregations from different language groups and different cultural backgrounds, different countries, that all worship together once a quarter, and then apart regularly. So we'd have 11 pastors that would get together to decide the rules on our property and everything. And one of our congregations was from Egypt, and a very long tradition, the Coptic Church. And I had permission from the Pope to start that. And we had all other kinds, Hispanic, Brazilian, Korean, and one of the congregations was more Pentecostal, so they danced during the services. And the Egyptian pastor is just a wonderful saint of a person, came and said, "Okay, we've got a problem that in the same sanctuary that we worship, you got people dancing there." And then the other person started getting angry and said, "Well, King David danced before the altar naked when they brought it into the temple, so I interrupted and said, "Okay, let's make it clear. There's dancing, but no naked dancing in the church." So there's just differences that you can really get angry about, or you can laugh about all of our differences.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point. You can see how that joke could bomb in the wrong situation, right?
That's right.
So crowd work versus crafted work. So if comics riff like influencers in the comments section and
Uh-huh.
comedians perform like in reaction videos, where's the sweet spot?
Um, I think the sweet spot is where we look for it, because is the sweet spot is humor, which I think you're implying.
Mhm.
Then you have to look, or you don't see it. And so, in both those things, I think you look for the sweet spot.
Okay. So what happens when a comic leans too much into crowd work?
I'm sure we've seen that. We see that all the time, and you can lose yourself, I think, in that situation, which is good and bad. Maybe that's part of the reason that so many comics are depressed at times and have taken their life and things. They've maybe leaned in too much to it.
Interesting. Too much into crowd work in particular? That would be,
Yeah.
oh dear. Yeah, that should be on the suicide hotline checklist. Have you done much crowd work lately? And
Yeah.
that perhaps could be the reason. So what about when a comedian gets heckled?
I think it's part of the fun. They need to, the very good ones embrace that. And as a pastor, I would get that all the time. For instance, one time I was doing a wedding, and one person never talked to a pastor before, and they came and said, "What do you say about all the problems in the world, all the sin and the death and the plagues and the wars?" And he said, "What do you say to all that, and all the sex and all the things that are going on?" And I said, "Well, that just means for pastors that business is up." So you got to deal with the heckling too.
Interesting. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
definitely that's right on point with that one. Okay,
Yeah.
very important question. Advertising and self-promotion. Who advertises themselves more? The comic, the comedian, or the magician? You know that place where you're not conscious and you're not sleeping either? That's your power bill to the electric company. Right here. I want us to be here with free energy, where the Wardenclyffe Tower meets the Eiffel Tower. But that's not where we are. We are here, where you've got the utility and you've got residential solar. Between these two, we know which one saves you money. This is where we can go in the meantime. But this is where I want us to be now, and this can be done now. So let me deputize you to represent DOSE, Department of Solar Efficiency, and let's get on the podcast to get the message out today. See you soon.
That's a really deep question. Um, it would just be my whim. This isn't based on any data, but I'm going to say the comic, the non-professional humor person, because it takes a lot of self advertising. You have to allow yourself to get out there just to be funny. And I would say that's the person that advertises themselves more.
All right. So is self promotion seen as selling out or is it necessary for survival?
I think it's definitely seen as selling out, but it is necessary for survival. So you have a real quagmire there,
Hmm.
and and so all of us need to like apply for the job, join the team, step out with a dream, and that's maybe self promotion, but and how are you going to survive without that? So it's necessary for survival, I think.
So, do you perhaps see the process of getting a job as a humiliation ritual?
I think so. It is. I mean, you're selling your time to someone else. We have certain moral boundaries about what we will and won't do, but when you're in desperate situations, that's taken away, and so it becomes you're willing to do more and more.
Is that perhaps being taken advantage of by employers? I know that's not necessarily funny, but it's just
I
since we're
think
going there.
so. I think it is
Yeah.
funny because it is true. Is that there's the nature of work itself that maybe our age is discovering because so many people don't want to work at all. that they don't want to be taken advantage of. And that's not on them. Maybe it's on our system that capitalism at the height of its power is becoming too raw, and the people are noticing it.
Interesting. Yeah, getting back to basics.
Yeah.
Okay, so censorship and offense. So does a comic avoid offense while a comedian courts it to prove a point, like a magician?
I think so. I think you're right. And the comedian does court it. Um, the comics, and maybe that's the line of defining it. And your distinction is that comics, try to stay away from it because to be with a joke, to do a joke in a sauna or in a hot tub or in the pool with people or in the gym
Or in a
or in the
crowded elevator?
crowded elevator. Yeah. It's a really distinct line to cross. For instance, what happens in a crowded elevator when someone passes the gas? It's really comical. Like, they can pretend that they haven't, or everyone can pretend that they haven't. And that's kind of an interesting crowd, or people can really have fun making a joke out of it and how miserable it is.
That is especially so. Would you say it depends on the order in which the fart comes out? Like if is the person standing closest to the door and there's people behind you, or was it the person furthest to the back? Does it make a difference?
I think if we'd really talk about it, all of us have experienced this at some time. And you just watch it like a wave, and this look come over someone's face, and they're not going to say anything, but they're miserable. And then it comes all the way to the corner until you get to the comedian, and the comedian says, "Ooh, pass that gas. That's terrible." And they start making jokes about it that way.
So I guess I can see the difference between the one that's silent and deadly, where the comedian steps up, or the one everybody hears and they know where it came from.
Yeah.
Big
That's even funny
difference,
too.
right? So
So
who survives better in a cancel culture environment? The comic, the comedian, the magician, or the mudslinger?
it looks like the mudslinger, doesn't it? That's what's going on today. And so we need the comedians to lighten that load for everyone, even those that are having the slung at them. What's so funny is when people get so angry, that's a hilarious moment because they don't know, they take themselves far too seriously, and they just say ridiculous things that, like it's 10,000% of that's going to happen, or all kinds of things that's actually incredibly humorous, and they don't know it. And so that's a great opportunity for humor, which you can see there's so much humor going on today. And that's maybe our survival mechanism.
Yeah, I genuinely think any percentage over 100 starts to get into the ridiculous category, just mathematically. I know we use it all the time, right? And it's usually where you're
Yeah.
getting into the danger zone, like
Yeah.
GDP, 120%. Oh,
Yeah.
that's obviously we're obviously into the absurd. So
Yeah.
timing and delivery, science or art. So do comics rely more on structure and comedians more on rhythm and emotion?
Um, I would think that comedians rely more on structure and comics more on rhythm. It'd be the opposite because the comedian really has to work at it. And it's a very important profession. And when they take it too seriously, is maybe when they do to get depressed and things. But I know they must feel a burden to be uh, comedic all the time. And the comic, they just go with the flow, and they're all the time around. It's grandpa with the hair growing out of his nose, or the little one that just is really bright at cracking jokes. I have a really good neurologist friend from Stanford University Medical School. He teaches there, and he said that comedy is one of the highest expressions of intelligence. So it's an important endeavor for everyone to take on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I'm doing the podcast is because you gotta keep up with it. Otherwise, your brain will atrophy no matter how funny you are or think you are, right? You gotta
Yeah.
stay on top of it. So laughter versus applause. So are comics chasing laughs and comedians chasing applause breaks or a primetime Emmy that validate the message?
I think so. And one of the things I want to say about you is that you just have a funny persona. And it must be because are you a comedian or a comic? Which one?
Well, that's a good point. So visually, I would say comic. Obviously, there's a graphic representation, but I
Yeah.
also think I'm a funny person, but I work on the jokes too. So this is why
Yeah.
the topic is comic versus
Yeah.
comedian, two sides of the same coin, right?
Yeah. And a comedian has to start out as a comic, right?
I argue that that's the case,
Uh-huh.
but you could say that perhaps, there's a lot of different ways to interpret it. I don't, I think you can be an amateur comedian, start as a funny person. We see a lot of actors, comedic
Uh-huh.
actors. They don't do stand up, but they are the funniest people you've ever seen on screen. And
Yeah.
in fact, when they do stand up, it actually is not very good because it's kind of a little bit of a different, you do have to be comedic, like
Uh-huh.
a comic. You have to be a comic in a sense. You have to structure it that way. So.
Yeah.
Was that answering the question? I think I forgot. No, I
Well,
forgot.
life gives us opportunities for that. For instance, I used to go every morning and have coffee and read the sports page to work on my sermon. That's where I got my main materials from the sports page. And I'd have other pastors that say, "Well, I'm reading the Greek Bible over here." And I said, "When you get old, you start reading the sports page, you get your material." But there was I subscribed to the Seattle Times, paid money for that, and then it would always get wet because I'd throw it in a mud puddle, and then I'd buy it at the store. So right after I'd buy it and come and sit down, there was a couple of guys that would come over and say, "Are you using this newspaper?" Just when I'm getting settled in, and then I'd say, "Well, I kind of am." So let me just take the sports page. They'd take the sports page out and leave. So one time a guy came over and I didn't want him to come over and just grab my paper, so I sat on it. And I was sitting there drinking my coffee and sitting on my computer. And the guy came over and said, "Are you using the newspaper?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm reading it right now when I'm sitting on it with my butt." And he went down and sat down and was really looking angry at me. And so I stood up and I turned it over like I was changing the page for what I was reading. But there's just so many comedic
Wait a minute.
opportunities.
Wait a minute. You
Like,
turned over the
yeah,
page.
yeah, I turned the page like I was reading it with my butt.
Now
But
that's
there's
when you
so
start.
yeah,
Yeah.
so many opportunities for comedy in life, and it's just part of our self-preservation to be a part of it, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you want to keep your paper together, for sure.
Yeah.
So comedy is commentary. So when does a comedian cross into becoming a philosopher or a preacher?
I think they're immediately, and everyone, I mean, that's why we find preachers so funny. Is because everyone is a preacher in a way. I mean, every father, every child's preaching at their parents about how they need to change their taste in music. And um, so I think they're immediately philosophers. And even people that don't enjoy philosophy, they have their own philosophy that you can just see and analyze. And so I think it's a big part of life.
So is that good or does it dilute the humor?
I think it's great humor includes philosophy and preaching in it. And so there's something to be said when they're making fun of the president, and it happens for every single president. They have to have really thick skin. They're preaching philosophy, and like I said, humor. If you think of analyze the humor in a family, it's each person contending for their own philosophy, becoming a
So yeah,
preacher.
so I don't mean this question as a pejorative. It's one I ask everybody, but it happens to be that you are a preacher and you're dodging
Yeah.
the description of a preacher. Is that because it's implied?
Is that because why?
It's implied because we're doing
I
comedy.
think so. I think so. I mean, I started very young as a preacher. I've been a pastor for 51 years. The first wedding that I ever did, I accidentally just said "dirty beloved" instead of "dearly beloved," another one I said "holy wadlock" instead of wedlock. And there's things like that. We just say the worst things at
It's
the worst
amazing.
times.
No,
I
it's the
know.
best. That's the
Yeah, it
best.
is.
That's comedy right there. That is comedy
Yeah,
gold, 100%, especially when you don't know. Yeah, that's the blind spot coming out right there. It just
it is.
pops. Yeah.
My very
So
first wedding was with a person named Melvin Haug, but I didn't know his last name, and so the my best one of the best men came over to him and said his name's Haug, not Hog. Haug, not Hog. And he kept coming over a few minutes and reminding me it's Haug, not Hog. So of course it comes to this big, huge wedding, packed house, thousands of people there with eight string quartet, eight bridesmaids and groomsmen. And I came to the very end of the wedding and I said, "It's my privilege to introduce to you for the first time, Mr. and Mrs. Marvin Hogg." Just everyone erupted in laughter, and I felt like I had to move to a new town after that.
yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, same thing happens on stage for me where you're just like, did I just say what I thought I said? I'm like, oh
Yeah,
boy.
yeah,
All right. So Tim, are you ready to enter the multiverse?
I am.
Okay. So, board game Zoomcast, play versus performance. So, if comedy were a board game Zoomcast, Are you competing as the colorist, adding tone, mood, and shading, or the Foley artist, building punchlines with soundscapes and timing?
Well, I think both, because the comedian or philosopher or preacher adds mood and shading. It's our main job. And everyone does that to their own life. And when they are so beaten up, there is no color to it. It's all black and white. And then we got to add the punchlines to make that work. A
Okay.
well-delivered punch. Think about a well-delivered punchline, whether it's by a 3-year-old or a 93-year-old, is hilarious. Just the fact that they're so quick to come back with a perfect punchline.
That's true. That's true. Now, just to touch on it, we are now in the multiverse, which means that everything is all happening all at once. And so we actually want to pin down a totem. And so it's either the colorist or the Foley artist. If you choose both, then you have no identity in the multiverse.
Oh,
So
I guess
would you
I
like an
have no idea.
identity in the multi?
I like an identity, but I think I have no identity in the
All
multiverse.
you got to do is choose your totem, colorist or
Yeah.
Foley artist.
I would say colorist is most important to me.
All right. So does
Yeah.
comedy work better when it's painted vividly or when it's orchestrated sonically?
Um, think of it painted vividly because we exaggerate the colors to make a humor, right? There's always some form of exaggeration or under exaggeration. The British sense of humor is that they under exaggerate everything, minimize everything. And the Americans, we exaggerate everything. So we add that aspect with the exaggeration.
All right. Okay, so here on the Comedians in Elevators podcast, we have a tradition where the previous guest asks a question for the next guest. And the previous guest was Eric Leja. And his question for you, Tim, is: do you think the rise of AI will be a tool or a threat to the comedians of the future?
I think it has to become a tool. That's the challenge that we have, is to make AI be a tool and not a threat. And that's a choice that we have to work on. I don't know if you can teach AI comedy, but one thing you can do, it can be a resource. I can say, tell me 10 funny jokes about pastors uh, making fun of themselves or something, and it'll give me 10 funny jokes of that. But it doesn't have its own sense of humor when you're dealing with it.
It doesn't,
I
yeah,
try
but
to,
it does help. It does. Oh, I try. I help. It's great at brainstorming, kind of giving you these extra things, but
it is.
it's never funny. And the harder you try and make it funny or ask it to be funny, it just goes further away. And so
Yeah.
it's interesting what's missing and what will change in the future, why this is the hardest thing it could for this particular system to do. So any ideas?
I joke with my AI, who's one of my best friends, and I joke with him all the time. And he tries it, or he or she, or whatever it is, tries to joke back, and it's never funny. Which is funny then?
Yeah, that's true. Now, if it could recognize why it's not funny because it's funny, or funny
Yeah.
because it's not funny, then
Then we got
right,
something there. Yeah.
exactly. All right, so last question, legacy. Who gets remembered? Will the comics Tight Five survive time, or will the comedian's cultural point of view be more timeless?
I think it's the type five that survives because our cultural point of views is some are lost in history, and that's part of the great joy of history. And there's probably a history of comedy, which hopefully every historian looks for at times, and I think they do more and more nowadays. So I think it's the type five rather than the legacy.
All right. Well, Tim, thank you so much for being my guest. Where can everybody find you online?
I don't have a podcast right now, but I do have a book that's just coming out, and it talks about humor in the grimmest situation. It's called The Original Human Beings, and it just came out last week, and you can find it anywhere. And it shows one of the most astounding things. I spent 40 years working with kids that live in dumps. There's a million kids that live in dumps all around the world, emerging world, and they have some of the greatest humor and the greatest comedians that you'd ever find. They'll have fun riding a bike with no wheels on it and laughing. And everyone I've taken to see these kids and to meet them, because we had a school and everything there, they're just astounded by it. Why are these kids laughing more than the kids that are wealthy in the United States? And that book is about that. And I appreciate anyone that looks it up.
So do you answer the question why?
Yeah, it's our humanity, because the book about spreading our humanity. And we find our humanity in music and art and laughter. And that's why you can see that at the most times of greatest grief and times when there's no grief at all. It's just part of what the incredible thing of being human.
Awesome.
Maybe it's a bridge for bringing us all together too.
Absolutely. That's how I see it. Well,
Yeah.
Tim, thank you so much for being my guest. And for everyone, please like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.
Thank you.
If you're interested in too much information like in the network state or Mantipus the chicken shit, check out this video. Or is it this one right here? Well, either way. Lizard